You know, The Little Prince, it's so much more than just a children's book, right? I mean, it's this global landmark, a kind of philosophical guide that's touched millions of people. But what's really fascinating is that behind those simple drawings and poetic lines, there's this incredible hidden story. A story of loss, of survival, and a kind of love that literally shaped every single page. Okay, let's get into it. So first, to get a sense of the scale we're talking about, look at this number, 600. What is that? Well, that's how many languages and dialects The Little Prince has been translated into. 600. That makes it officially the most translated work of fiction in history. I mean, that is a staggering achievement, and it really speaks to how universal its message is. So that leads to the big question, right? The one we're going to try to answer here. How on earth did this happen? How did a simple fable written by a pilot living in exile become this massive global phenomenon? You've got a story about a little boy from a tiny asteroid written by a French pilot in New York City during World War II, of all places, and it just captures the entire world's heart. Well, the answer, it turns out, lies with the man who wrote it. All right, Section 1, The Pilot's True Story. Because, you see, to really get this book, you first have to understand the author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. His life wasn't just inspiration for the story, it was pretty much the raw material. Yeah, this guy was no mere storyteller. Saint-Exupéry was the real deal, an aristocrat, an inventor, and a pioneering airmail pilot. I mean, he was flying these super dangerous routes back when planes barely had any instruments. He was a true adventurer. But, and this is a great little detail, his colleagues also called him a distracted flyer. Apparently, he was often caught reading novels mid-flight or just doodling on whatever he could get his hands on. So he wasn't just writing about adventure, he was actually living it every single day. But his life was also just filled with profound tragedy. In 1917, his beloved younger brother died. Then, in 1935, he had a near-fatal plane crash right in the middle of the Sahara. A few years later, he's forced into lonely exile in America during the war. And finally, his own story ends with a mysterious disappearance over the Mediterranean. You have to understand, each one of these events is like a key that unlocks a crucial piece of The Little Prince. Okay, let's start with his brother. Back in 1917, Saint-Exupéry's brother, Francois, who was only 15, died from rheumatic fever. His last words to Antoine were, "Don't worry, I'm all right, I can't help it, it's my body." Just think about that. A kid facing death with that much acceptance, it's haunting. Now, just hold on to that quote for a second. Because decades later, what does Little Prince say to the pilot right before he leaves? It will be like an old abandoned shell. There's nothing sad about old shells. It's almost the exact same sentiment. He's reassuring the pilot that his physical body isn't what's essential. The author literally took his own personal devastating grief and transformed it into one of the most touching philosophical moments in the entire book. And these connections aren't just thematic, they're incredibly literal. The book opens with a pilot crashing in the Sahara Desert, right? Well, that actually happened to Saint-Exupéry. In 1935, he and his mechanic crashed while they were trying to break a speed record. They somehow survived for 4 days, dealing with severe dehydration, even hallucinations, before they were miraculously rescued by a Bedouin on a camel. So the story's setting, it's not fiction, it's a memory. Okay, next section, a fable for grown-ups. So you can see, armed with all these intense life experiences, Saint-Exupéry wasn't just sitting down to write a simple children's story. Not at all. He was crafting this really powerful critique of the world he saw all around him, specifically the world of adults. The prince's journey, hopping from one tiny planet to another, it's basically an allegory, a tour of all the absurdities of adult life. He keeps meeting these people who are completely obsessed with what they call matters of consequence. You know, numbers, power, rules, all the stuff they think is so important. But in the process, they've completely forgotten what actually matters. I mean, think about who he meets. There's a king who rules over absolutely nothing, a businessman who thinks he can own the stars just by counting them, a geographer who knows everything about the world but refuses to ever actually go out and explore it. Each one of them is this sharp, almost funny, but also kind of sad portrait of a grown-up who has totally lost their way. Then we get to what is really the philosophical heart of the entire book. It's when the prince meets the fox, and the fox teaches him this concept of taming. Now, it's not about control or domination. In the world of this book, to tame simply means to establish ties. It's about the slow, patient process of building a unique bond with someone, turning a stranger into someone who is truly special to you, and you to them. And that brilliant lesson from the fox leads us to maybe the most famous line in the entire book. It's the fox's secret. He says, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." And that's it. That's the core message of the whole story. True value, things like love, friendship, beauty, it's not stuff you can see or count or put on a spreadsheet. It's something you have to feel. All right, our final section, the prince's enduring legacy. And here's the tragic part. Saint-Exupéry disappeared on his final reconnaissance mission in 1944. He never, ever got to see the incredible impact his little book would have on the world, or how it would become this massive global phenomenon. And this simple chart just puts it all into perspective. The only book in all of human history that has been translated more widely than The Little Prince is the Bible. That's it. That's the list. It has crossed every single cultural and linguistic border you can possibly imagine. And its legacy just keeps growing through all these incredible adaptations. I mean, you've got everything from a 1970s musical, get this, with the legendary Bob Fosse as a dancing snake, to a breathtaking stop-motion animated film that won awards, all the way to a recent Broadway acrobatic show. There's even a beautiful reimagining in American Sign Language. The story just proves to be endlessly adaptable. You know, the story doesn't really have a simple happily ever after ending. The prince returns to his planet, and he does it through the bite of a snake. It's sad, but he leaves the pilot, and by extension, all of us, the readers, with this incredible gift. He says that when you look up at the sky, it'll be as if all the stars are laughing. The meaning isn't in keeping him, it's in the connection you made, a connection that endures forever. And finally, the book leaves us with one last beautifully unresolved question. The narrator, years later, is still worrying. Did the sheep he drew for the prince end up eating his beloved rose? And it's more than just a question about a sheep and a flower. It's really a question about hope and about responsibility. Saint-Exupéry just leaves it hanging there, for each of us to answer for ourselves. A final thought on whether the things we tame, the things we care for, are safe, and what our answer to that question means for our own universe.